Hello there, and thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is John, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Now, if you're not familiar with those terms, I'll break those down here shortly. I do just want to address the elephant in the room, the box behind me in the back seat of the car. I do apologize. We are in the process of selling our house and moving, so we just got some stuff back there, but anyway, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the subject of this video. So, with the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, essentially the difference on these is, so the letter of the law would be basically like you have this list. You could say like the 10 Commandments or something like that would be an example of the letter of the law. Like you have a list of rules, a list of commandments, a list of do's and don'ts, things like that. And that's essentially what the letter of the law is. And I know that, like, if we're talking about the law of God, yes, there's a lot more to it than just the 10 Commandments, but I'm just using that as an example. Now, the spirit of the law, on the other hand, would be more like what is the purpose behind the written law, but behind the letter of the law. There's sometimes unwritten rules that can't be clearly stated or prescribed in a list of commandments, but you have those lists and those rules for people who don't have that internalized locus of authority. Some people who maybe just don't. They, because of their level of spiritual maturity or whatever, or just their physical maturity, whatever, you have to outsource some of your knowledge and sense making to some people who have more experience and stuff like that. So there is a time and a place for rules. When I'm talking about this subject, I don't advocate for throwing out all the rules and throwing out the commandments and things like that, but you're going to see here in a second why sometimes it might be necessary to break those rules. So when you think of like the letter of the law, I think probably the best example of that would be like the Pharisees in the time during the times of Jesus, when Jesus was here on the earth, and you had these Pharisees and maybe even like the Sadducees. Those could be considered people that were like living by the letter of the law. They were like making sure that everything was kosher, that you were not doing anything that would be considered unclean, or like not doing any kind of work on the Sabbath, things like that. Whereas probably the best example of someone living by the spirit of the law would be Jesus, who he never sinned. He never did necessarily anything wrong, but by the standards of the society at that time, and by the standards of the law of Moses and things like that, it looked like he was breaking the rules sometimes, like when he would heal on the Sabbath, or he would allow his disciples to pluck from the cornfields or wheat fields and things like that on the Sabbath day. And so we're gonna talk a little bit about that. I've seen, it seems like probably maybe it's not the majority of Christians, but I think the Christians that are the loudest, that you hear the most like criticism of Christianity about, it's because, I think the criticism towards Christians largely is towards those who are embracing the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. And I can give you some examples. Like, you could have someone who is like just this very self-righteous, outwardly clean-looking Christian that never cusses, never smokes or drinks, or doesn't have any tattoos, never did any kind of like physical intimacy with anyone outside of marriage or anything like that. Yet when like you encounter them at the grocery store, or you're taking their order at a fast food restaurant or something like that, or at a sit down restaurant as like a waiter or waitress or something like that, they could be as rude as like the rudest person you could imagine. And or maybe they come across as like very pious and like religious, but you see that like false humility, which actually comes across as very prideful. Where like, oh, like I've witnessed this before, where like going to a restaurant with other Christians where they served alcohol at the restaurant, and then maybe the waiter asks, would you guys like to look at our drink menu? And then someone will say, oh no thanks, we're Christians, we don't drink. And so that kind of false humility, it's very prideful, and it's just, and that's basically what an example of living by the letter of the law would be. Now I'm going to give you some examples of like some Bible examples of people who didn't live by the letter of the law, yet they were commended for it. Like, for probably one of the most well-known examples is Rahab. Rahab was this, she was a prostitute living in Jericho during the Old Testament times, whenever Joshua and the Israelites were going through Canaan, going into the promised land to conquer that area and stuff like that. And you had these, you may correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it wasn't the Philistines in Jericho, I'm not sure, but needless to say, they were like enemies of the Israelites and stuff like that. And at least according to the Bible, it looks like they were kind of painted in a negative light. And so these two spies are sent to Jericho to spy out the land, to kind of see what they're dealing with before they go to conquer it. And they are taken refuge by this prostitute in her house. They let them stay in there and hide there. And then whenever people come in and they start asking about, like, have you seen these spies? And she said that she hadn't seen them, so she lied on their behalf. Now you can see there's different parts like in the Bible where it's like, thou shalt not bear false witness, and there's rules about lying. But yet Rahab, I think it was listed, I believe she was listed like in the famous chapter Hebrews 11, which a lot of Christians call the Hall of Faith. She was listed as one of the people that was like basically living according to God's standards. She had faith and she pleased God, even though she broke some rules that would have been considered like in our day we would consider that unchristian. But she realized that there was something greater at stake, and so she broke the rules to protect these people. Another example would be like David, when I think he went into like a temple or something like that, a tabernacle possibly. I don't remember the exact name of it, but he and his men that he was with that were helping him while I don't know if this was during his, like, while Saul was persecuting him, or while he was just like out conquering some parts of the Canaan or something like that. But he took the showbread that was for the priest, that was only for the priest to eat, and he and his men ate that bread so that they could sustain themselves. And even Jesus gave the example, I think, like when he was allowing his disciples to eat, to pluck grain and corn or whatever on the Sabbath. He said, like, well, David, he took from the showbread that was only for the priest to eat. And he was trying to point out the importance of you know, the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. And he didn't use those terms, but I think that is essentially what he was trying to get at. So I think it's important as Christians that we learn to live by the spirit of the law. I'm not saying the letter of the law is unimportant or that you should throw it out. But as you mature, as you grow out of this rule following stage, as you're a child and you're a teenager, you have all these rules given by your parents. If you grow up in, a somewhat, I guess, conservative home. I mean, even some non-conservative homes, I'd say probably have some strict rules as well, just for the safety of the children and stuff like that. But at a certain point, you outgrow those rules. That, like, I would tell my daughter. I mean, she's only 2 right now, but as soon as she would understand the concept of like crossing a road, I would tell her to never cross the road without me or her mom holding her hand or carrying her across the road or something like that. But if she was still following that rule at 18 years old, there would be a problem. So I'm trying to give you guys an example. There's rules in place for a reason, but at some point you have to outgrow the rules, and you see why the rules are there for people who maybe don't have that internal locus of authority, that they haven't internalized the kingdom of God, or internalized they haven't the Christ within hasn't awakened inside them yet. They haven't been born again or enlightened yet through the light of Christ. So you understand why those rules are there, but you don't have to live by them for the rest of your life. When you understand the spirit behind the rules. So I hope that this makes sense. I know that this wasn't a very scripted episode. This is just something that's been on my mind for a few weeks, and I've been wanting to talk about it. So I hope that it was interesting. I hope it was helpful for you. I'm going to go ahead and end this video, but if you would please subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. I'm trying to get up to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm hoping to do that. And be sure to like this video if you found it interesting, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. God bless.